The first European explorers arrived in the late 1600s. At that time, the French claimed the entire region west of the Appalachian Mountains along the Ohio River Valley. By the mid-1700s, French influence in the area was challenged by British explorers. They'd begun to push west over the Appalachians beyond the borders of the colonies in the east. In 1751, Christopher Gist became the first white man to set foot at the point. Gist, a woodsman and surveyor, was hired to explore the Ohio River Valley for the Ohio Company, a land speculation group from Virginia wanting to establish trade in the region and English settlement for the British Crown.
You're coming down in the late 18th century, so the 1700s, on a flatboat, and you're in the midst of a pristine, virgin forest, stands of trees on both sides of the Ohio River. And right at where the Licking River flows into the Ohio, there was a major limestone rock formation. And you're coming down a river, unless it's springtime and you've got the freshets, the floods, the river's going to be much more narrow than it is today, and it's going to be much lower. In the summer, it could get so low that you could even wade across it.
4 years later, the French and Indian War began as a conflict over land and trade, and it ended with British control of North America. The colonies in the east soon began the settlement of lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. But Native Americans resented the English trying to take over their land. Indian raids of British forts and massacres of white settlers living on the frontier served as a warning. Their land was not to be settled. To improve relations with the Indians and encourage trade, King George III issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763 that limited settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. And for a time, few whites dared to travel into the Kentucky wilderness. But at its best, it was only a temporary halt to a rising tide of westward expansion.
The Longhunters were explorers and hunters who would enter into the region for extended periods of time in which they would negotiate with some of the Indian tribes in the region for fur in exchange for weapons. And then they would take the furs back to the established colonies and trade those with merchants, and the fur would be shipped off to Europe. But upon returning back to the established colonies, they would speak very highly of this region that would become known as Kentucky. And this ultimately triggered the influx of settlers into Kentucky.
Two legendary men who made several expeditions into the wilderness were Daniel Boone and Simon Kenton, who used the point to explore the Licking River Valley and the Ohio country. The information gathered by these two men and others proved critical to the early settlement of Kentucky.
Kentucky was a land of plenty, a land of Eden, a land of milk and honey, a land for people that wanted to come here to find what they were seeking. It was a land of Native Americans to the north and south, but it still seemed like it was a neutral ground between the warring tribes. So people came here to find a land that was not to them, didn't seem to be settled. It seemed to be a land vacant, waiting for settlement to come here. So the settlers from beyond the mountains came seeking land, but also seeking the land of plenty that it was, with bison, animal herds of all sorts, deer, turkey. It seemed like an Eden on earth, and this is the land that they wanted to come to. So they came down the river to settle this land, to be this place that was eventually Kentucky.